I don't know that Bob Pollock does because he's a little bit brighter than I am. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning.
Our conversation with Bob Pollock from the Extension brought to you by Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. You can give them a call at 479-1160 if you have a question for Bob this morning. So we talked yesterday about spotted lanternfly. I think we can put that one to bed for now, at least, unless you have something new you want to tell us.
No, nothing other than if you go and look at the map, you will see that, and we kind of talked about this yesterday, but we have Beaver County and Allegheny County, which adjoin each other.
Mm-hmm. Then it skips over us to Blair.
Counties, right? Then it skips over Westmoreland, Indiana, and Cambria, and then it starts in Blair, and then it's contiguous from there all the way to Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we're sandwiched.
If you're traveling the Turnpike or Route 22, once you hit Altoona, well, actually before that, the Blair County line, from there all the way to Philadelphia, and then it goes north up to Columbia, Luzerne, and Monroe counties.
Mm-hmm.
So those are just a couple of counties south of that northern border of Pennsylvania. So that whole chunk in there is in a quarantine zone.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's spotted lanternfly. We spent a good bit of time on that yesterday. I want to talk today about the fact that we have begun the month of September, and probably there are some things that we should be doing outside with our lawns, our trees, our plants, anything outside that's growing or is approaching the season when it is going to soon go dormant. And maybe you can fill us in as we start September. What are the things we should be paying attention to?
Sure, and one of the things, this is a great time to, if you have spots in the yard that need reseeded, or maybe you have to you're seeding your yard, or even reseeding part of it. This, now that we've gotten some moisture, and a little bit more moisture in the ground, that makes it a prime time to get in there and get that job done, so that grass can get germinated and has enough time to get established this fall.
Okay.
Before we move into winter.
Mm-hmm.
So great time to get that job done if you can fit it into the schedule, and the sooner the better. It's just we're starting to have, of course, shorter days and a little bit cooler nights, but the ground's still warm, and so we can get the seeds to germinate pretty quickly.
Okay.
And once that starts to grow, then it has time to grow a root system and get established enough to hang on for the winter and be in good shape and fill in by the time we get to spring.
All right. So if I'm making a checklist, that's the first thing I put on it.
Yeah, so that's a good thing to do. You might have perennials, some of the bulb crops, the daylilies and things like that are dying back now. So now's a natural time to go ahead and clean those up. If you need to move them, you could start to do that now. Cut the foliage back, and then lift them if you need to, and separate them, especially if they've been there a while. It's a good time to lift them up, thin them out, keep the best bulbs, and then you can replant the best ones and discard the other ones.
Okay, let me stop you for a second there because it brought to mind a question. Our rhubarb the last few years has just done terribly. It did well for a lot of years in this same spot, and the last few years we've gotten no rhubarb out of it at all. Is there something I should be doing now to ensure that when the spring comes along, it'll perk up again?
Yeah. I mean, we've come off a lot of stresses in the last several years, from an overabundance of moisture, which can stress those plants, and then into a big dry spell this summer for a while, hot and dry. So they're kind of probably suffering from that. And as the longer that stand is there, then it can kind of start to decline in productivity as well. So this might be the year where you go in and once it becomes dormant, you could go in and clean that up, lift it all, sort things out, and then replant the best plants.
Okay. But that replanting should be here in the fall too, right?
Yeah, you could do that, especially if they seem like they're starting to go dormant. You could lift them and get them replanted yet this fall, or you could wait till late winter and do it then.
Okay. All right.
And the other thing to do there with some of these perennial crops like that is to do a soil test, see where our soil pH levels are, because those can change over time, especially depending on whether we've added anything to the soil like lime over time or maybe not, or whether we've added any fertilizer or not to help keep the nutrient levels where they need to be. And that could even be the problem before you go to all the work to dig it up and do all that. Taking a soil test, seeing where things are, that could be part of the problem.
Okay. All right. As we enter into September as well, and I don't want to lead the conversation because I started by saying what should we be doing, is it time yet, or do we need to wait another month or so for putting mushroom manure or some other fertilizer for the fall onto the garden as the gardens start to clear out and the growing season for a lot of them is now getting to the area where it's past, and we think about fertilizing or even planting cover crops for the winter?
Oh, yeah, this is definitely a time to do that. So as in the vegetable garden, as crops are harvested, it really is good to clean them out. So on those shorter day crops, on the spring crops, hopefully by now, once you've harvested the plant, and it might have been cabbage or broccoli, anything like that, onions, any debris that's left, that should be removed from the garden, composted. What we don't want to do is leave things, and it's okay to work it in, especially if it was still healthy. But if there were a lot of spots on the leaves from various leaf spots, there could be anthracnose, and there's other diseases, and especially some of the vine crops. Those things you can have, there's white molds, there's phytophthora, black rot, there's different things that can get on those zucchini, the summer squash. So it's best to get those plants cleaned out of the garden as you harvest those crops. And you may have done that anyhow because you may have had an early crop, come in, harvested, and then worked the soil again and replanted with something else.
We've done a little of that.
Keep efficient, use of space, and also have succession crops there to keep supplies going. So, but it's good to keep things kind of cleaned up. The longer it's there, the more chance there is of something attacking it. And it could also be insect-related.
Yeah, okay. And so a cover crop is a good idea right now, too.
Yep, so September is also a great time to get those cover crops in, like rye grain is one key one that's used a lot and is the seed's accessible, and it's easy to sow, and it provides a really good cover crop. And rye grain is one of those that you can seed it now. It's going to grow for a while this fall till it gets too cold, and then it'll just stop growing. But it will stay there. So it'll hold the ground in place, and then it'll go dormant, and then in the spring, it'll start to grow again. And that's when so it's normally planted in the fall, and then overwinters, and then it will mature. If you let it go all the way to maturity to make seed again, to harvest the seed, or to harvest the seed and then have your own grain that you can reseed for the next cover crop, that'll mature in June.
Okay.
Next year, if you let it go all the way. But in most cases, we're using that as a green manure crop. So we're going to seed it this fall, let it overwinter, and then in the spring, let it get some growth on it, and then we would till it under.
Okay. All right.
That adds some nutrients. It also reduces weed pressure, but it also helps hold the soil. And then, of course, when we work that all in the ground, that becomes organic matter. You have to be a little careful with that depending on how you work your garden and the tools you have to do that, because it can get a lot of growth there that can make it challenging to turn it back under and then get it rototilled or spaded and worked into the soil and worked down so that you can replant again in the spring.
Mm-hmm. All right. Some good things here this morning, and probably next week as we begin our talk, we'll be talking more about what to do in this early part of September. We'll be heading toward the middle of the month then, and just find out what's going on. Very good. Thank you, sir.
All right, you're welcome.
Thanks for
the opportunity.
Thanks for the spotted lanternfly discussion yesterday, too.
You're quite welcome.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160.